7 o'clock tonight is Tuesday, August 22nd, 2017. I want to welcome everyone to this special meeting of the Bethel Board of Finance. Welcome to all our guests, Board of Education, and citizens. I'd like to start off with the Pledge of Allegiance. Please join me. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Tonight, our agenda consists of one item: consideration from the Board of Selectmen for the Rockwell and Johnson School projects. If you recall, we met on July 26th, a similar special meeting, and we had presentations for the Johnson and Rockwell schools, and it was suggested that we meet again when all members were present to discuss, and fortunately all of our members on the Board of Finance are here tonight. So I will turn this over to our first selectman, Matt Knickerbocker, and you will introduce our guests. Is that the way it will go?
Would you like me to?
Yes, I'll turn the floor to Dr. Carver to introduce the folks that are here to support the presentation.
Very well.
Thank you again for allowing us to come before the board. Before we get started with introductions, I wanted to just kind of quickly update where I thought we left from the last meeting and kind of what our initial intent or hopes was to accomplish at this meeting. In some changes or revisions into or requests that we're making on our side in terms of plans and timelines. At our last meeting, we presented a very detailed presentation about the design ideas for both Rockwell and Johnson School. We discussed, the designs themselves, the educational specifications, or the programs that we thought were critical for the 21st century learner and where Bethel was going to be and how that learning environment would be supported for the next 50 years going forward. And we also spent a lot of time talking about the design, the square footage, and got into some detail with Ken Viega, who can't be with us tonight from O&G, in terms of the cost estimates. By the end of the meeting, we had, obviously some of the members weren't present, so we wanted to make sure that you were all comfortable with the information and had an opportunity to digest the information, and also have an opportunity for us to come back and ask any questions that you might have of anything that we presented that day. And I also know that we had talked about the resolution and the resolution language, and the impact of state grant funding and how that could affect, a potential referendum. And so we were also going to come back with some ideas, working with our first selectman and the town attorney, about ways to structure resolutions so that it would incorporate language related specifically to grant reimbursement. So we are here tonight to answer those questions. We had also requested at that meeting, given the timeline and the time frame which we outlined at that meeting, where we thought we might be to make sure that we were on par with where the state, the school construction grant process was. Because the reality is, as you know, we filed on June 30th with the Office of School Construction, which is the process by which we would get the grant reimbursement. And then the one thing that's kind of holding the application up is obviously the referendum itself, that the taxpayers actually have to approve to be able to get to the priority list and then receive the school construction grant. And we had talked about that at the last meeting. And so we were talking about maybe a September timeline for some of that to occur. And given the recent issues with the state budget, and the fact that the state legislature has not resolved the budget issues, and they certainly haven't resolved the ECS issues and the revenue that's coming into the town of Bethel. After a lot of discussion, both with the members of the Board of Ed that are here and our administration, that we really feel it's prudent to just give it a little more time. And so we're here tonight not to make any decisions per se. I mean, that's obviously your prerogative in terms of what you would like to do, but just to be able to answer questions, get more information, and possibly move the timeline back to look at a possible referendum in October as opposed to September. And so you're probably saying, well, why October? There's a couple of reasons. One is to be on par or to be in line with the school construction grant process. November 15th is our deadline in terms of the referendum. So we can't get on the priority list until we have a past referendum, and that would have to occur before November 15th. With the state budget, it's likely, and I know there's a lot of rumors, and quite frankly, I don't have great information about where things are right now. But I do hear that they are going to go back into session on the September 11th or thereabout, Terry. They are going to go back into session at that point. And we're hopeful that the state legislature is able to work on the state budget crisis. In talking to our delegation, as I said to you last time, I still believe that ECS and school construction are completely different issues. And that their view of the ECS funding, although we talked about last time, there might be a greater priority list and there might be, the bonding might be a little more limited than it has been in the past, that they still believe that that money is still going to be there for school construction projects. That has not changed at the state level. Now, that's what they're reporting at this point. But we will know better by the end of September kind of where we are in that process. And so we're looking at possibly moving the deadline up, or moving the timeline that we had talked about last time to like mid-October, mid to the end of October, as opposed to the end of September, which I think is what we originally had talked about last time. So that's just a request. And I believe, let me introduce everybody. You all certainly know Terry Yansky, our school business official. This is Bruce last name. Gilmer from ONG. He's representing Ken tonight, who is on vacation. Tina Greco from Perkins Eastman. I think you met her last time. She went over the design in detail. And so I believe the intent was to be able to ask more questions, to process the information that we presented last time that we can answer for you, and then possibly to discuss the resolutions, if I have it right, Mr. Chair. I think that's what.
Do you
Yes.
have any changes in facts and figures?
No,
So these are,
the same from last time, the same ones you saw last time.
so nothing has changed.
Nothing has changed. We were supposed to meet with the Office of School Construction today. There was a communication, I think, mix-up between their office and us, but we're going to be meeting with them next week to have a better sense of kind of where we are and what the priorities within the projects are in terms of how does Bethel fit with all the other applications that are in, and they'll give us a sense of whether or not they want us to make any adjustments or changes. They review in detail the project itself. So that meeting is scheduled for 1:30 on the 31st. Yes. So, yes, next Thursday.
All right, so the amount that you're requesting is still
For both projects.
$68,328,150, correct?
Correct. Yes. For both projects.
So what I will do, do you have any more presentations? Do any of your group have presentations?
No, we were
or-
really just coming back, as we said, to answer the questions as a follow-up from our last meeting.
All right, well, I'll open it up to any questions from the board. Brian?
I have a question for Bob. Bob, how many, each mill would represent how many million in the budget? Like, for every million, what does that do to the mill rate?
The mill right now is about $1.8 million.
Questions?
You had made a comment that you weren't sure what was going to happen with the capital funding from the state.
No, I am sure about that. Well, I'm not sure in the sense I can't do a magic ball. I'm not sure what the state legislature will do, but what our delegation has been telling us is that they do not see impact with the state budget issues. they are not seeing any impact except a little bit of reduced funding for those school construction projects.
What we've been told is that it won't be unlimited bonding.
Correct.
So in other words, if the state says that they are going to allow $450 million in school construction bonding, and then projects that are put on the priority list, in other words, being put on the priority list, which happens by December 15th, would then be the ones that go in front of the legislature for approval.
Correct.
So in the past, they didn't have a cap
On how many projects
on how
they
much
would-
bonding they would be willing to do or not do.
Correct.
And so they always referred to the list as a priority list. But in terms of us thinking of a priority list, it really wasn't the right nomenclature. So now, if they're gonna cap how much they're gonna bond at 450 million, and you have, say, 20 different school districts putting their projects in with applications, if the total of those 20 schools is 600 million, not all of the projects
fine.
will be placed on the priority list to then go forward to the legislature for grant approval.
So I may have confused your cap. So the cap that you're talking about
Yes.
is the statewide.
It's the state's cap.
400 million cap.
Yes.
Not necessarily the 45%.
No,
No,
we have
correct.
not heard any change to that. And 45%, we talked about this in a lot of detail last time, Ken went through it. It's 45% of eligible expenditures.
Correct.
And not everything in a project is eligible for reimbursement. In a Renovate is new, much more is eligible than in just a Renovate, but it's not going to be 45% of the gross.
And I think, Bob, just to add on to that, I think that's why the Board of Finance, rightly so, was so concerned about the wording of the resolution, because it really does need to be contingent, and that's certainly our desire, to be contingent on the state funding being there. And that's what the discussion is.
So what you're hearing now is that the uncertainty as to whether or not you get on the priority list as a funded project, not necessarily the 45% or the extent.
Correct. And you, to be able to be considered for the priority list, you must have a successful referendum.
Yes.
And you must have that successful referendum.
November 15th.
Before November 15th. The priority list is compiled December 15th. Now, if they change it by a day or two, I'm not sure, but that's their timeline that they use.
Yes.
So we were targeting September 26th as a possible referendum date. Now we're looking more at like October, around the 17th, as a possible referendum date. And from there, you have to back up for public hearing, town meeting, and this board has to first send it on. So we spent a lot of time at the last meeting with Marty talking about making sure that town leadership is covered. In other words, you have an out clause that even if we have a successful referendum,
We don't want Bethel to be in a situation
if we
where the
don't
state
make,
funding is
if we
cut.
don't make the priority list and therefore aren't going to be approved for grant,
Yeah.
we don't want Bethel to be responsible for the full, for
Amount.
going forward with the full 68 million. Okay,
So the uncertainty is kind of binary. You're either on the list or not.
correct.
The 45% is not an uncertainty.
Correct.
Eliminate one uncertainty.
45% are eligible cost.
Can that change though? Or, I mean, you're saying.
Eligible and ineligible, I don't, and I'll look to
That-
Bruce and
That's the
Tina.
part that gets, it's, I don't trust anything that comes out of Hartford anymore, quite frankly. They're playing games
Yeah.
with ECS money right now.
We're well aware.
Legislators playing games because they will bring session. And I just don't feel comfortable enough with anything right now, to tell you the truth. Is it something that's needed? Absolutely. I mean, I went to one of the schools.
Yeah.
And nothing's been done. But the problem is the funding, are we gonna get that 45%? Where are we gonna make it onto that list? I'm sure. What happens if we don't make it on the list? Does it kick to next year, in 2018, 19? Or do you have to start the whole thing again? And then all the escalation costs are going up on top of it.
All right, let Marty answer that
Yes.
question.
If you take a look at the resolution that's in front of you, one of the things you're going to see is that it is a two-step process. I'm gonna call it the committee. The committee that oversees the bonding has to sign off on it first. And I believe that they'll also set an amount of what they believe is gonna be the reimbursement. But you gotta remember, it's only a snapshot because it doesn't end until the building is built. But anyway, what happens, if it doesn't get past that process, we're done. We're all finished. Right? If it gets past the first process, then what the resolution says is that at that point, because we have to get moving along, there's going to be some monies that may be allocated in order to get everything ready for
The design.
the design,
We
for
talked about
bidding
this
and
in the last
everything.
meeting, right?
And then what happens is when the legislature signs off on it, that's when everything's a go. And that also has to be at the same amount. And we have, the calculations that we have in the motion itself are the actual amounts that we're talking about. And you can see what the amount is for reimbursement. So if it doesn't come across that way, it's over.
It's over.
All right.
And we wanted to be
Um,
clear about that.
Look, I know you guys need work done to those schools too, and, you know, I've always done my best to support the schools. The real issue for me right now, worrying about the 45%, that's way down the road. I'm worried about the 8 million that the governor has threatened to take away from your district. And if that occurs, the reality is, if we did nothing and just passed it on to the taxpayer, we're looking at a 4.5 increase in our mill rate. It's just my personal opinion to move forward on anything until we know what level the state is funding us, if at all, or how we're gonna react to those cuts. It's just, it's not the right thing to do for the town. The schools need to be repaired, no one questions it.
Yeah.
The issue is the state threw a huge curveball at us this year and said, hey Bethel, you're out $8 million. And, you know, that represents more than 10% of our total town budget. So for me, I understand the resolution, and when we were talking about it, this wasn't our economic reality. The reality to me is we need to get over this first hurdle, and hopefully they have a budget quickly in September so we can discuss it. But until this is resolved, is it practical to say we're gonna move forward?
Well, Brian, believe me, no one cares more than I do about the $8 million. And I've been pretty vocal about it.
And Larry, you guys have been fighting for us, and we all know it.
Absolutely.
You guys have been excellent.
Here's why we said October, to be honest with you. It's our hope that they do manage this by the end of September. The reality is that at the beginning of October, and Terry can jump in whenever she needs to, but we are going to know, because if the executive order, which is the $8 million, the governor's executive order, is going to affect, because that's when the ECS payments are made. So we're going to know by October 1st kind of where we are with the state. And, you know, I don't even actually disagree with you. I think that what we have to do is, and if we push it off till kind of mid to the end of September, we have that time to learn. And if it's bad, then we may not be able to do it. Let's just be honest. I mean, this is my opinion. I haven't talked to the board about it, but it is obviously, I hear you. And I think we're just as concerned about the state budget and the impact locally. But at least it kind of keeps us in the running, and we'll have better information by the end of September. Because I think if it's not settled by the end of
It's not,
October,
if it's not settled by September 30th.
I have very,
But
very.
if we met October 1st, or we met October 2nd, once we knew where the chips fall,
Yep.
is that enough time to put together?
No, because you need to have time. You have to back off from the referendum. You have to back off.
But you still have a couple weeks, Terry.
You have a couple weeks, but you have to have, you have to have a public hearing, you have to have a town meeting, you have, you have to, you have to go through the
I
entire
understand.
process.
It's just, again, this is just, I'm one voice on the board. For me, to ask me to approve any resolution to go forward without knowing where the state is, I'm not doing my responsibility for the residents. Because honestly, what he is proposing, I don't think a lot of people realize the impact of it. It's huge.
It is.
Huge.
It's devastating.
All right, Cynthia.
I have an even more cynical, obviously, we know you need, it's imperative that these schools are, that you need this, obviously. But here's how little I trust the state. I don't trust that even if they approve your grant, that at the end of the day, your reimbursement's gonna come through. Because up until recently, we thought we were gonna get $8 million. Up until recently, we thought the pensions were funded. Up until recently, we thought we were gonna get a budget. None of that's happened. So I tend to be kind of cynical to even think that, let's say you got on the priority list and they signed it up and said, yeah, no problem. When it came time to reimburse, who the heck knows? So that's how cynically I'm looking at it, as far as just now, the timing of now. It's like all the cards have been thrown up in the air. It's impossible to, you know, when you said hope, and, you know, I mean, I'm not being sarcastic, this is the Board of Finance, it's not the Board of Hope. Like, hope is something that doesn't, it's just hard for me to apply. You know what I'm saying?
And I think that what I'm suggesting is even if we push it off until mid-October, we'll have a much better sense. So again, I'm not asking you to approve anything tonight.
No,
I'm
I
not
understand
asking for
that.
any resolutions to be appointed. But I think if by moving it down, we'll have better information. And then if we're sitting here at the end of whenever the timeline we have to back it up to,
Yeah.
and we're saying it's not going to happen, then that's a whole different conversation. But I want to put Bethel, I said this from the beginning, I want to put Bethel in the best possible space to get the most that they can within the context
Well,
of
let
these
me ask you
projects.
this, where would Bethel be if it was, let's say it went to October and it was approved, and they moved you up on the priority list, and then they signed off on it, where would Bethel be if everything's moving along, and then it comes time to reimburse those eligible costs?
Well,
We don't have the money.
I believe it's
What happens?
legislated, am I wrong?
Yeah.
Yes.
Sorry?
They actually, it's legislated,
I know
that they
they
have to
say
give
they
the
have to
reimbursement.
Oh, okay, well, there's a lot that's legislated. I'm telling you, I just have a bad feeling just because of what's going on. I'm just being totally honest. I know that it has to be done. I'm just petrified that the state of Connecticut has not shown one iota of follow through and keeping a commitment. Hasn't shown any evidence of it whatsoever. And even if the money's allocated for these projects, we thought the money was allocated for the pensions. So I just don't trust the state, period. Just my opinion, period.
I hear you. You know, there is a difference. I mean, it is legislated.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you, pension law for governmental bodies, you don't have to make the minimum
Correct.
deposit.
Right.
So, and that's the law. And so Connecticut got away with not making their minimum deposits. But when they pass a law and they legislate the reimbursement,
Yeah,
it's
a little different.
How long would it be after the referendum?
fine.
Let's say the referendum passed in October. How long would you know if the grant got accepted or granted?
So what we talked about this at the last meeting, so we would know by December 15th is when the state puts out their priority list. And on December 15th, that list, that comes from the Department of Administrative Services, their recommendation to the state legislature. And then what happens is, in the next session, they vote on the priority projects.
So when does that session?
February
February.
7th.
Oh,
Okay, February, okay. So, yeah.
well, it may not happen on February 7th, but next year's session is a short session.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's the second session of a biennium. So it shouldn't drag on
So no
infinitum.
work
So
would commence until you get word of that?
well,
No.
we
No,
had
well,
a discussion
we had
last
that
time.
discussion.
I know,
Yeah.
I didn't see.
Do you want to
Well,
talk, Marnie?
What it is that based on the resolution, what would happen is, once they got the committee to sign off and put it on the priority list,
Correct.
the town would be authorized to go ahead and spend up to $3 million to get everything ready for the
Design.
bid packages, schematic designs, et cetera. But they wouldn't be
Yeah, I
able to
see
do
that,
anything else until the legislature
Passes.
signed off and
Okay,
passed on it.
I see that in here.
Yeah.
Right. So our outlay, 3 million is at risk, that's it.
I got you.
Can you
All
give
right,
us the
Bill?
timeline? Oh, sorry.
Bill?
Yeah, I very much appreciate the administration's stance in thinking through this issue about delaying. I think that is absolutely prudent. And I realize that the ESC, ECS cost sharing is a different intellectual
Problem.
problem. But if the worst happens, they are intertwined.
They are.
And they meet with the voters and the taxpayers of Bethel. So I'm very much in favor of postponing the decision until it's resolved, the ECS situation is resolved in the state, and we can move ahead. And I think the outs that are contained in the resolution, as Attorney Waller has outlined, are very important. And
They are.
something that I really, really appreciate. So,
I do have a question for either Matt or Marty. So the process is that it goes to a public hearing. During the normal budget cycle, after a public hearing comes back to the Board of Finance. Does it come back to the Board of Finance then before a town meeting?
Yeah.
Okay.
So if the
It's
public
up-
comes
so-
out and
That's at
says,
the
no
discretion of the Board
way.
of Finance, yeah.
So if
Doesn't
we
happen.
have
It doesn't happen.
if we have
It
to
doesn't-
keep a timetable.
Yeah, it doesn't have to.
Doesn't
Yeah,
have
I put that, Marty, is it 10 days notice for a public hearing?
Yeah, normal.
Calendar or business?
Less than 7.
I think
One public hearing is
It's
different.
no less than 7 and it's no more than 15.
That's for the town meeting.
That's for town meetings. For a public hearing
No,
is,
it's usually 10 days.
It's 10 days for
10
the public
calendar
hearing.
days, not-
okay, so the
So
time.
and not to screw up our timetable, could we do the public hearing and come back?
Yeah.
Oh, all right,
Yeah.
all right, okay.
Yeah.
When do they want to have a referendum?
All right, we're gonna go over, for everybody's edification, we'll go over before we leave a tentative or
Possible.
hopeful timeline, so that we all can plan on it. Okay, Bill, do you have any more questions?
I don't, I just appreciate the stance of the administration, and I feel like we're all on the same team here, and we're all
We are.
in very similar ways.
And
Gary-
just remember, the other reason that we did continue forward, even in these times of state crisis, is because, and we don't know the answer to this, but it is very possible that when they read structure, the percentages of reimbursement, we got in for June 30th because we were concerned that 45% of
gonna
eligible
become
costs
30%.
may not exist next year. And so we wanted Bethel to be possible, to get the most possible reimbursement before, because there's been a lot of talk about going to 30%, 33% across the board. So that is the reason that we did keep moving
We
forward.
kept with this
The
timeline, and we said it before, we want Bethel to be in the best possible financial situation to renovate these projects. And that is our intent, in kind of trying to keep it moving. Maybe hopeful is a bad word, but with the intent that the legislature does resolve their issues.
All right, Gary, you have a question?
Yeah, Dr. Carver, I had a question regarding,
It's more than 10. It's more than 10.
I know the Board of Ed is gonna monitor this, once it gets going and so forth, and you're gonna be due diligence on this, and we appreciate that. Has it been decided if there was gonna a building committee set up to monitor the progress of this whole thing?
The first selectman, the selectmen's also already established one.
Are we gonna
You
use
already-
the already established building Ways and Means thing, or? are we
It's
gonna-
already-
It's already been appointed.
Yeah, it's already been
Okay.
appointed.
Yeah.
And they've
we
already
have-
appointed an ad hoc member. to it.
Yes, Mr.
Okay.
Olson and Bob Germanero are representing us, and
Okay.
Terry and I are being ex officio
Right,
members of
okay.
the committee.
That's critical.
All right,
Yeah.
Thank you.
Larry, as chairman of board, Ed, did you want to speak?
I just want to make sure everybody understands that we're talking about separate pots of money. And from what we hear, the state does not intend to stop all construction. They are going to change the way they have done it, because when in the past they said priority, anything that was presented was done. And they have $650 million worth of bonded construction that they're dealing with from prior decisions. In this environment, they're talking about cutting that down to 450 and establishing a list of things that have to be done.
Realistic.
And it's going to be a true priority list. That is a separate pot of money from operating expense, where you're talking about cost sharing and you're talking about all the other things that have been in the paper. And we don't know what's going to happen with that. But my opinion is there's hardball being played in order to get both political parties to the table to talk about a budget that the governor believes is the kind of budget he wants to deal with. I don't know how that's going to come out. But no one has told us that they're going to stop construction entirely.
In fact, the opposite. But we, to Larry's point, we understand the optics of all this, and we understand that the average citizen probably doesn't understand those subtle differences, and the fact that that it is a separate thing. So I think that's what's driving this also.
To the taxpayer, they don't see it because it's going to fall on them anyway. You know, the 8 million is going to fall on them, and the bonding is going to fall on them. So I get it that it's two pots of money, but perception-wise.
Yeah, the difference is that this town has invested $150 million in infrastructure over time. And you just can't walk away from that and say, well, we're not going to worry about it anymore. That's an investment that I, as a taxpayer, want to make sure that we maintain. Otherwise, we wasted a lot of money over the last 30 or 40 years. Building these things and then forgetting them.
Its timing is really
right.
horrible, that's all.
I have a question, I don't know if anybody can answer. What creates a priority for Bethel versus other towns? There's going to be a number of towns that are going to want to be on this priority list. How do we get to be a higher priority than other towns? Is there a reason why we would be?
Yeah. There's several things, and I'm going to invite Terry and Tina and Bruce to jump in, but we've actually spoken to Costa Diamenta, who's the head of Office of School Construction, about this. And the state actually has like 9 different things that they look at to actually generate a priority. I think they would all tell you that in the past, as Terry said, there's never been, everybody's gotten it, so it's never been a priority. But they look at things like, does the district have a declining enrollment? They're not funding projects for districts that have declining enrollments. Bethel's is at best stable, if not growing. You know, we've talked about that before in other context. They look at the age of the buildings. They look at, help me, Terry.
Other projects that we've done in the past. And Dr. Carver invited
Code
Costas
compliance.
Diamantis to come
Yes,
down,
that's
and she
important.
toured him through both buildings, and at
did.
the end, he said, well, these buildings haven't been touched, they've served you well,
They need it.
they need renovation.
And
And he had already looked at our enrollment as very stable and actually
Correct.
increasing.
So, so those are the big things that they're looking at, because what they're concerned about, and I can't disagree with them. They're concerned that districts are coming to them when they have communities with declining enrollment, wanting to renovate instead of looking at consolidation of buildings. There was a real boom across the state for magnet school building and charter school buildings, and that's all been scaled back. In fact, I don't think they're funding any more projects. So, you know, and I think the News Times did an article where they actually had Costas quoted Diamenti, and he said Bethel's in a good position for it because of what our specific context has. And so I'm pretty confident about the priority list. Like, I don't think that's going to be a problem for Bethel.
All right, here's another question. What happens if they say you can have one school done instead of 2?
We talked about that too. And the reality is given the way that we are looking at our grade configuration, we would have to do Johnson first because we're moving, because Rockwell's so overcrowded. We'd be moving 3rd grade out of Rockwell, and we have to put the children somewhere. So we would have to prioritize Johnson as a project and then look at Rockwell possibly down the road. I think that would be the plan. But you know, we have yet to even know what they're going to say at this point. But I
mean, that is a possibility.
It is, and I believe the structure of the resolutions would still allow you an out, correct?
Yeah, the resolution is such that if one of them goes down, it's done. It's
Yeah.
over. So they're tied together.
It's all or nothing.
That's
Correct.
basically it.
It gives you an out, the community an out.
But we are listing, I mean, we
The
are
projects are
listing the
listed
amounts of
separately.
the projects were filed as separate projects. So when they vote, if only one's gonna go forward, then the way we have to structure the vote is so that one could go forward, right,
Right,
Marty?
I know.
No, that's not
That's not the way it's
the
worded
resolution
here.
is
Oh,
worded.
then
It's
we'll have to
worded,
look at
as
that.
I'm reading, it's all or
It's all or
nothing, am I right,
nothing.
Marty?
Yeah,
That's
Yeah, the way
correct.
it's worded,
So we'll have to
we'll have to look at
possibly
that.
address that.
or maybe
But-
separate resolutions.
But, I mean, if you're asking my opinion, I think that's with the school that we would have to start with, just because of the needs and the piece.
Originally, we started with separate projects to be done
Sequentially.
sequentially.
Correct.
The cost advantages and savings to us, given the fact that they're right across the street from one another, you're talking about saving $1 million or more.
But if it's one or the other, then,
Then we have to make sure we're covered.
let's just speak to Attorney Lawler. Yes, go
Well,
ahead.
what I was gonna say is that if you end up trying to put it on as two different resolutions, and Johnson goes down and Rockwell goes forward, I think you got a problem.
We do have a problem.
So that's why,
We have more
we're
to
tied
third grade.
together.
Right.
And the other thing I wanted to say is I think this board should be aware of this, is that if you don't start planning for the meetings now, the public hearing, the town meeting, and the referendum, and you wait until absolutely let's say at the end of September 30th, you may not have time to do a public hearing, a town meeting, and a referendum. I think the registrars today indicated that the last day that we can do a referendum before the election is October 17th. So if you wait to the 30th, we got a problem. We got 17 days to do 3 major meetings. And also remember, the town meeting sets the date for the referendum. Now, I can't remember the last time when a date was recommended that they didn't take it, but who knows? It's another
We're in uncharted territory, right?
Well, it could be another problem, although I've never seen that happen.
All right, and the drop dead deadline for this is November 15th
It
when
is.
they go on this priority list, right? Or they,
To be considered for the priority list, correct.
which is,
December 15th.
December 15th.
December 15th.
Yeah.
But you have to have an approved referendum
by
Before
November.
By November 15th.
By November
Okay.
15th.
Yeah.
All right.
If,
So,
if we had our referendum November 7th,
Can't. I don't think
No.
the machines have to
That's
match.
too close.
I had extensive conversations with the registrars and town clerk about that. Because of the testing for the machines for the municipal election, the last possible date for a referendum would be the October 17th. Can't go past that.
He's
what's
talking
And then
what's the earliest date in November that we could use?
November 28th. So it's long past the deadline.
Past the deadline. My suggestion would be that, doesn't have to be tonight, but maybe in the near future, that you go ahead and set everything up like you were gonna do this on October 17th. Set your date for the public hearings, this is the Board of Selectmen, set your date for the town meeting, get the resolution approved here, and if what happens is, if the problem with the funding for the school system, it goes really bad, I don't see any reason why the Board of Selectmen and the
Can't
Board of
just cancel
Finance can't get together and rescind everything.
Correct.
And do it before that time period.
Mr. Chair,
yes,
For
go
the
ahead.
town meeting, yeah.
just so you have an idea of what the timelines are, in order to have a referendum on the 17th of October, the last possible date for the town meeting would be Tuesday, October 10th. And Monday is Columbus Day, so we couldn't do it there either. So Tuesday would be the drop dead date for that. You could have a public hearing anytime in the last week of September. You just have to be sure to notice it 10 days in advance. You could have more than one public hearing if you wanted to. You could do that as often as you want. There's really no limit.
Marty, can we give ourselves, let's say the end of September comes, we still don't know what's going on with the educational funding. Can we give ourselves an out in our moving the question saying if by October 10th we still don't have a state budget, that issue, no public meeting? Would that be a legal way to
Yeah,
protect?
I assume you could do that, sure.
So that would be an option saying if we don't have a state budget, it's a dead issue until we figure out what's going on with the state.
And how would you vote on that? What would that, I mean, if we were to vote on it to send
You would
it,
make a motion to schedule a public meeting contingent on the educational funding being set by whatever date you pick. And if it's not set by the state, and we don't know where we're at.
First, we would have to vote to send it to public hearing.
Well, you're not
Minded
voting
is,
to send it. What you're talking about is, you're talking about the resolution. You would make that another condition of the resolution, that, you know, that
Right,
that we
okay.
have
the
to have
amount
the
has to be
funding.
known.
So you wouldn't have the public hearing if there was not a state budget
Right.
by then?
You could have your public hearing, you just wouldn't have your town meeting,
Yeah.
where
Right.
you set the referendum date.
Go ahead.
If, Marty, correct me if I'm wrong, but, I mean, if there's still an element of risk, you could still adopt the resolution and go right up to the 10th and then reject everything then at the town meeting and not proceed. Correct?
Well, that's what I was talking about, that
Yeah.
both boards could rescind what they did, or, you know, pass
Right.
another resolution that they're not gonna go forward.
At
So
the
really,
town
so
meeting.
really, the real deadline, assuming you move forward, answer questions, you know, adopt the resolution, the real deadline for go or no-go is October 10th.
Which would be a town meeting date.
Correct, that'd be a special town meeting.
Excuse me, Matt, the problem with that is, you know, you may want to do that at the town meeting, but the people that are there may not want to do that. So you've got to do it before you have the town meeting. You've got to stop it before that date. You can't go to the town meeting, and, because they could stand up and say, oh, no, we want to vote for it.
Yeah.
Okay.
that
And you got a
could
problem.
happen.
Well, you could still schedule a special
Yeah, you
Board of
could-
Selectmen, Board of
That's
Finance
correct.
meeting,
Right,
like at
that's
6
what I'm
o'clock
saying.
that day.
And you could
Okay.
end it at that point.
Marty, what would happen if, and I'm not taking sides, the selectmen say, we still want a town meeting, and we as the Board of Finance say, we don't want a town meeting? Would it go back to our original resolution? I mean, would you have to have a unanimous decision not to have a town
You know,
meeting?
if you voted to rescind it, that's it. There's no
Done.
sense in even having a town meeting.
Either board could do it.
Um,
You see what I'm saying? If the selectmen say, let's say the selectmen say they don't want to have the meeting, and we say, well, we do want to have the meeting, and we don't have matching opinions, we don't have commonality.
Who wins?
We're in uncharted territories here. Who wins?
I'd have to think about it.
Yeah.
That might be something we
Sorry.
want to answer. I appreciate your honesty. I mean, that's.
All right, so let's go forward with this. Let's finish up with questions. We have our next meeting on September,
Is it 5th?
September.
5th.
what is it?
Oh, I'm sorry, September 12th.
12th. second
September 12th, and the October meeting is,
10th.
11th.
yeah, okay. So what I'd like to do is go over this resolution prior to our next meeting. And then perhaps at our next meeting on the 12th, finalize this calendar for October. And hopefully, we'll have additional information or some kind of a pulse on what's going to happen. Your feeling is the last week of September, that you'll have a better idea. That ECS check comes in when?
It comes October 1st.
It's in October.
October 1st?
And quite frankly, if it's not settled by then,
If it's not settled by
It's gonna be
September
spring.
30th,
I think,
All bets are off.
the check won't come.
yeah.
Okay.
Or it
And-
won't come on time.
And then, if that ECS check doesn't come this last week of September,
Well, it won't.
October 1st, whatever, then we have
A different.
more immediate problems than the building of the schools in 2 years, am I right?
You are absolutely accurate.
And then we meet again with a whole different idea
Correct.
and agenda on how we're gonna get through the rest of this year, let alone what we're gonna do 2 years from now.
Correct. I think you have accurately depicted the situation.
Mr. Chairman, can we get an opinion from the town attorney on dueling sides? If one side says yay and one side said by the next meeting, do you think you could get us an opinion on that?
Well, I don't think you have to worry about it unless you pass this tonight.
Well,
Well, no, I thought we were gonna vote on it.
No, we're not gonna pass anything tonight.
I can check it for the
Yeah,
next meeting.
yeah.
Sure.
Okay.
We just get an opinion, what
Yes.
happens if we both vote yes,
let
and
me-
then one has
let me
fire
get-
remorse?
Let me make sure I understand this. So you're saying that you go to the next meeting, this board votes for the resolution.
They vote for it
And
too.
and then we find out we get some bad news. One board says, let's
No.
continue, and the other board
Right.
says, no, we
No.
don't.
Yeah.
Who's gonna be, okay.
Who takes precedent?
and
Yeah, Marty?
Marty, yeah, can we work on that wording so that if the state tells us one can go forward and the other can't, we're gonna have to look at that again.
The problem is it's gonna get so complicated that you'll be in the booth for an hour trying. You know, I never, my intention was, the reason why you have a lot of language regarding the bonds is, I didn't want to have to deal with that in the booth, and I don't want to have to deal with it at the town meeting. Only the main question about funding the money, subject to what your resolution was. And I think that if we start doing that, we're gonna have to look at it a lot more, so.
And if he separates it, and like he said, one is voted, my kids go to Johnson, I want that, if there's only gonna be one school versus
Yeah.
Rockwell,
You don't
you're
want
gonna have no
two, you
competition.
don't want two questions, but I think within the wording of the resolution, we have to have the option to go forward if the state approves one to go forward.
Or the one of your choice.
Yeah, John.
All right.
Or their choice.
Well, it's gonna be their choice.
Or whoever's choice.
Yeah.
Yeah,
to-
the board- the
to
board-
make that choice.
All
Johnson.
right. Yes, Bob?
Sorry, Dr. Carmen, just one more question. The meeting you have a week from this Thursday, on the 31st, with the state construction.
Yes.
I take it that will just be focused on the eligible
Yes,
base?
they'll go over the project in depth. They'll talk about the space. Remember we talked last time about the space standards and the waiver that we'll need for the space standards. They'll go over the design. They'll go thoroughly through the cost estimates, eligible and ineligible cost. I have a good sense that we'll have a good sense leaving that meeting, kind of where we are.
This is what we submitted to them for
Yes.
each project. Each project, this is what was sent to the
Yes.
state. So, this is what they could ask us questions about any
Any
part of
aspect of it.
So it would be the building aspects of the question, not the no insight into the legislative process.
We might get a sense of things. Costa was very determined today to make sure that our projects were that we met with him before September 1st. And I think it's because he knows that they're viable projects, and that he wants to ensure that we're in a good place.
Yeah, he told his staff member, I want Bethel. He
In.
said that Bethel has to be in before September 1st for this meeting.
Can you provide us with a report out from
I
that
can.
meeting?
In fact, I'd be happy to. I'll give you an update.
You also, were gonna ask our bond agent to break down more years for us. I think he had quoted us 25, and we wanted a 20-year option, and to see, the effects on the mill rate based on the year. And do you think we can get that prior to our next meeting?
Oh, I think so.
Yeah, absolutely.
Even if you email it to us? Or?
Yeah, so because I think the one that you received was 25 years?
We received
Yes,
25.
25.
And so, just to be clear, so 20, 25, and we'll do 30.
Yeah,
Because
just give us,
because I know you don't agree with it, but school construction projects can be bonded for 30 years. So we could give you all of those scenarios
Different
at
scenarios.
our next meeting.
My concern is the timeline, just to because we want to make sure we're not closing our own options. So if the Board of Finance meets September 12th, does that leave enough room for public hearing and town meeting
Yep,
and,
the pace would be pretty brisk after that, but yeah, those times are not.
okay.
And what I'm gonna ask Deanna if she will send out a suggested calendar for September and
For
October,
the town
including
meeting.
the referendum, town meeting,
Yes,
and public hearing to everyone here so that we could
yes.
look that over and put that in our calendars. And when you meet with the state building committee,
The Office of School Construction, yeah.
right, would you explain to them that you have been to the Board of Finance twice?
Yes.
And I think we're all in agreement, we are positive but cautious. I think that's
we
the
all are.
phrase to use. Positive about school renovation, but we're very cautious about costs, reimbursement, and actual check in the mail.
And Bruce, if your members need an additional meeting, put in an additional meeting.
And we're happy to come.
We're happy to come, because come that, if we put this timeline together,
We have to.
and we come September 12th, we
gotta roll.
We gotta roll.
I
So
would
if-
opt for a meeting with Governor Malloy, with all of us, because that, I mean, we've heard it, and we're just sort of like this now, you know? If I could get into his office, I would have a couple things to say.
It's difficult for a board to feel that they're prepared. So if your members feel they need another round of questions, we want to do that, because we don't want to come on, if we have a condensed timeline, I don't want people to feel like they were rushed.
The questions that we have cannot be answered by
That's
the
right.
Board of Education.
Yeah.
They cannot.
And it's a question of the
No fault.
resolution language
no.
is very important.
Okay.
So,
You've answered every question that we've had.
Thank you.
We have all the information from your point of view. We have no information on where the money's coming from, or if it's gonna come. I think that's the issue. Brian?
Can we just do a checklist of the questions you're gonna answer for us, so we're not
Absolutely.
sitting there on September 12th?
So here's,
So we were gonna do the bonding,
correct, at 20,
20,
25,
25,
30. Yep.
Attorney Waller was gonna let us know that
The
if
board's,
come right before the public meeting, one commission has a change of heart, who takes priority? You know, do we still have to be unanimous?
we're going to provide a summary to you after our August 31st meeting with the Office of School Construction, correct?
And obviously, if you hear something from the state in
I'll
regards
let you
to your funding, you will let
Everybody knows.
everyone know.
I've been pretty open about that.
It's here or it's not here.
you went to the town, now, you know.
That would be very helpful. Are there any other questions that we wanted answered prior? Because I just
Were
want
there
to
any
come to
others?
September 12th. And
I just had a question for Marty. Do both boards, Board of Selectmen and Board of Finance, have to adopt the resolution?
No, not to adopt the resolution, but what happens if after the fact they decide to rescind theirs? That's what he's getting at. If one of you, let's say
know.
after we get the word. that-
October 9th, we
I know.
want to rescind. We just want to say, forget it. We didn't get the state money. We're not comfortable doing this until we know. The selectmen say, we're going forward. The Board of Finance says, no, we're not. I don't know if that's ever been addressed.
I think the Board of Finance would have the final word.
Well, I think means we don't know,
So.
right?
I would
I mean,
think.
I prefer a legal opinion that can.
Okay, so you'll get that for us. Okay.
I don't want your word.
Chris Cornwell said.
That's it.
It'll hold up.
Gavel set.
Just say I think.
All right.
I love it.
Any other questions?
Right, Bob? Thank you.
Comment? All right, Gary? Bob? Anything else? All right. Can I have a motion for?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? So moved. Thank you.
It's killing us.
Just let me make sure I've got your spelling of your name right. Oh, it's on the